Good afternoon, Presiding Officer. I respectfully request the same courtesy that was shown to COBA in allowing me some time just to fill in some gaps, some facts that I think will help us all see big picture as you prepare for your hearing, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Firstly, Sheriff LaRocca and Commissioner Sposato are mitigating operational issues that I'll get into a little bit of detail with. They both combine to have the experience needed. The focus is on management. Armor is gone, thankfully. NUMIC is our current healthcare provider. As Captain Sullivan just mentioned, 57 officers were recently promoted in all ranks on October 25th. Everyone here would agree that's the most promotion in years. Again, why? The focus is on management. As for hiring, there are difficulties that we face. Currently, we're working off the 2019 civil service list. Approximately 485 failed to comply, which means they did not appear or did not cooperate when canvassed. Approximately 100 investigations were approved, but only 7 applicants accepted the conditional offer of employment. In June, we graduated a class of 26. Last week, we swore in 23 recruits. Conditional offer of employments were sent to 20 applicants. 3 deferred, 17 accepted. They will go into phase 2 of hiring. We requested more names from civil service to increase for the next class. 20 pending investigations should be completed by the end of January. There is a 2020 list following the 2019 list that's being canvassed now. Civil service contacted 220 people and only 45 appeared to start the process. So these are the difficulties we face in hiring that I just want you to be able to appreciate. Now, the jail population and overtime. For reference, overtime in 2019 with 1,011 inmates average was 27 million. Overtime in 2021 with 712 inmates was 31 million. So less inmates, more overtime. Simply stated, that does not add up operationally. So let's talk about where we are to date. The budgeted overtime for 2022 is 21.5 million. To date, we're at 27.3, but we still have to get through November and December. As Legislator Ford pointed out, those are high overtime months due to the holidays. The overtime is projecting to be around 32 to 33 million. That's 11 to 12 million dollars over budget. We have correction officers making close to, or in some instances, more than their salaries in overtime. Some of it is purely security, and that's nothing we can do to manage that. But the non-secure posts, that's where we can manage. By way of example, in 2021, a correction officer whose base salary was $107,000 made $203,000 above that in overtime, totaling $311,000. That's just an example of no management. So we're not looking to cut to the bone. We're just looking to manage better. The correctional officers do a phenomenal job every day, every night, 365, 7 days, 24 hours. They are in the infrastructure that definitely needs work, and is in the capital plan. The master plan's in the capital plan. I'm told the roof is going out to bid in January, so I defer to DPW on the infrastructure. But I just thought it was very important to emphasize that safety will never be compromised for officers or inmates. However, it is our duty to the taxpayers to manage the extreme overtime being generated with less inmates in custody. Thank you for your time.
I just wanted to follow up on one thing before I turn it over. That's number of inmates is down, overtime is up. That's only part of the equation now. I mean, as Mr. Sullivan just indicated, the county over the last several years has not been keeping up with attrition. So the number of corrections officers is down. So if you have fewer corrections officers, it's always been the case as long as I've been here. If you have fewer officers in any sworn area, you're going to have greater overtime. It happened with the police. It happens with every union. So if you're losing officers, I don't know that you can blame management if you don't have sufficient officers to cover it.
So to that point, in 2019, there were 816 correction officers. In 2021, there were 739. Our budgeted headcount is 783 for 22. 23, it's 790. Currently on board, we have 720. So we do have the budgeted headcount. If I could get through the difficulties we face getting the applicants, which I outlined earlier, we are budgeted. We just have to get the heads, get the bodies in for the job, and we're working on it.
Okay, just one other thing. Even though the head count is down in terms of inmates, does that equate to different shifts, different patrols? I mean, does that mean you're definitely going to have, you should definitely have fewer hours being put in?
Well, it's how many housing units you have open, what you can consolidate, what you can't.
Yeah, I think this is a discussion, as Legislator Ford indicated. She'll have a hearing, but I think it's the answers to some of these questions obviously comes from you, but as well as Mr. Sullivan and his representatives, so that we can parse out the real facts. Minority Leader Abrahams.
How are you, Ms. Fox?
I'm well, sir. Thank you.
I don't want to start off by saying I was troubled by some of the things you said, but I just want to make sure I understand. When you brought up the context of an officer that makes $103,000, and now with overtime they see an additional $203,000 that bumps them over $300,000. What point were you trying to make?
I was trying to show that overtime needs to be managed.
But by you saying that, and I understand that overtime needs to be managed, it could come off like you are saying the correction officer is the reason why we have the high overtime.
I'm saying overtime was absolutely not managed.
But how can overtime be managed more properly when I hear at the jail officers are told they can't go home?
So there's security, which that is true, and then there's non-secure posts, rehab, let's say. There's other posts that you could manage overtime way better, and it was not being managed at all.
Got it. So overtime could be managed more, can be managed better.
Yes.
However, there is a degree of secure areas that are at the jail where even if an officer didn't want overtime, he wouldn't be able to go home because of the staffing restriction, because of the lack of staffing that's there.
This administration is fully on board to hire and staff up. We agree on that.
Okay, but to me, and I've known you for quite some time, so I'm going to think that maybe I interpreted it the wrong way. But for me, when I hear that kind of number, it seems like we are trying to, in the lack of a better word, demonize the folks that are receiving it, even though they have no control sometimes if they're in secure units, to be able to determine whether or not they even want it.
That's an outlier. If that was the case, then everyone would be making that amount of overtime. The whole job isn't making that amount of overtime, so I'm not trying to demonize whatsoever. I'm trying to point out that's an example. Otherwise, everyone would be working that amount of overtime if it was that bad.
Like I said, I've known you for some time, and like I said, I just want to take it for what I interpreted it to be, because usually when I hear, and I've been through quite a few administrations, Republican and Democrat, when I hear folks from the administration bring up stuff like that, which we understand that could be an outlier, it could be one issue, it seems like we are trying to say that, what do you mean the correction officers have it good? They're making $200,000 on top of their salary. Why are they complaining? But I'll take it that you did not mean it that way.
I appreciate you letting me clarify.
Okay, sounds good. But I do want to highlight the fact that wasn't brought up with the presiding officer. It seems like you had mentioned that Mr. Posada has the integral experience to be able to run the facility. The previous administration, I guess, either didn't value that experience, thought that experience was the wrong experience, whatever may be the case, they decided to dismiss him. That being said, the current administration is using him in a capacity, in a leadership form, to work with the interim sheriff to be able, Mr. LaRocca, to ensure that something happened. You just heard from the head of the collective bargaining unit, head of the Correctional Officers Association, say that we can't work with him. We choose not to. And I'm not saying they choose not to, but I don't want to put words in their mouths. But they're clearly saying they cannot work with him.
What?
Are we saying that it's going to be the administration's way, hell or high water? I mean, what exactly are we saying to the membership of that union?
Sure. So I was just at the facility, I want to say maybe 2 weeks ago, could have been 3, forgive me with the time, but I was walking in to meet with Sheriff LaRocca and Commissioner Sposato, and as I was walking in, the entire COBA board was walking out, having a meeting with them. So there is no indication to me that they're not working together.
But did you hear what he said today?
I heard how they feel about him.
Oh,
Yes.
You said, okay. But the words were very pointed. They're very clear. Not to quote Mr. Sullivan, but he clearly said, we want him out.
That's his opinion.
No, that's the opinion of the entire delegation, not just his own opinion. His entire delegation spoke to that.
Yes,
That's
I did hear that. Sheriff LaRocca is in charge of the jail. Commissioner Sposato is the Commissioner of Corrections, and they work together, but Commissioner Sposato reports to the sheriff.
See, I think this will have to, Madam Chair, this is going to have to get clarified in terms of the hierarchy and how this works. So if I'm understanding you correctly, everything stops with Sheriff LaRocca. He makes the final decisions.
He's the sheriff, yes.
And Mr. Posada is a part of those decisions?
Yes, in the org chart, sheriff here, line down, Commissioner of Corrections.
And then Mr. LaRocca reports to you?
Correct.
So if there was a concern that the membership had that they didn't feel was being addressed properly with the current configuration of leadership, Mr. LaRocca, or with Mr. Posada, who's advising Mr. LaRocca, they can bring that concern to you?
They can.
Okay, all right. But I think what we have to do is we have to be able to address that issue a little bit more, because obviously there are. Look, I'll just say it frankly. How do we not know Mr. Posada is going to advise Mr. LaRocca of something that the union may see as retaliatory? And we don't know that.
I think that's speculating. I'm not sure.
No, it's not. Well, unless you're saying that the entire delegation is speculating, because that's the impression that we're getting.
I'm not aware of any retaliation.
All right. I got a lot of respect for you. So I'm giving you a lot of rope here. I don't want to play politics from the podium.
Right.
So let's do this. Let's have the hearing. We'll be able to address some of the issues. I think I'm just saying, from your standpoint, representing the administration, I want you to be prepared, if Mr. Posada is not here himself, to be able to answer the questions on how the decision-making process occurs in regards to Mr. Posada advising the sheriff on what issues. Issues that are related to security, or issues related to the infrastructure at the jail being replaced. We need to be able to understand all of that. As I said before, and then you've been here, Tatum, for a long time too, in my 20 years, I've seen union presidents have concerns with what they have said about commissioners all the time. I hear that all the time. That's a part of the process. I hear that all the time. People disagree. As much as Sully talked about Commissioner Ryder, I've heard union presidents come up and say negative things about commissioners before. So that's nothing new. That being said, I've never seen an entire delegation say that. So from that standpoint, to me, I'm understanding this incorrectly by Mr. Sullivan, they are perceiving that Mr. Posada, that the buck stops with him. Now, they have a different impression than what you're telling us. So I think we need to expand and review that a little bit more during our hearing.
And if I don't want to belabor this, just one last point. If I recall correctly, COBA did ask for Sheriff Flood to be removed. I believe they had said they had no confidence in her but she stayed on. So there have been times, just by way of example, where the delegation has gone and said something about another sheriff.
Understandable. That's it. I'm done. Thank
I
you.
agree with you. Thank you very much for speaking today. And I guess just to follow up with Legislator Abraham's, his question, when you talk about the secure and the non-secure posts, what are the ratios? How many, like, if there's like 780?
I don't have that
Yeah.
answer as I stand here today, but we can get that for you.
All right, well, that will definitely be something that we will be asking for. In regard to the hiring, you know, what priorities have been placed to expedite? And have we looked at and investigated to find out what are the drawbacks in people taking these jobs? If they have taken the test, you reach out to them, and we know that if it was 2019, we're talking 3 years later. They may have gotten a job elsewhere. They're working, may have moved out of state. But if we have a test from 2018 and a list from 2020, am I correct? Am I saying this wrong?
2019 list and a 2020 list.
And what's the latest? We just gave a test or what? No.
We have another list, I believe, after that, but I can confirm that.
Okay, and have we exhausted 2019?
We are exhausting it as we speak. These last 20 pending investigations will exhaust the list, but we have the other list. And as I said, 220 people were contacted, 45 are interested, and they're being investigated.
All right, and do we have dedicated investigators that are working just strictly on the hiring of correction officers?
Yes.
Okay, so that they follow it through, they do the backgrounds, they're not doing any other job, they're just working with candidates for corrections?
Yes, Commissioner Ryder has been great at
Okay.
dedicating people just to focus on corrections.
And we did pass it so that they can be hired from out of Nassau County, correct?
Yes.
All right, that's the one thing. My concern, though, too, is when we talk about, even with the overtime, that's one issue that will have to be examined. But even when you talked about that, you had 1,100 inmates, and overtime is, say, 27 million. I'm just throwing the numbers out there. But now we have like 800 inmates, and overtime is $10 million more. And I agree with the presiding officer. I think that that's because we have less officers. You know, we have to, because we have to maintain these posts, we have to make sure that you have the proper number of officers working at all times, not only for their protection, for the protection of the inmates as well. But also, the President Sullivan did bring up that the levels of violence has increased dramatically. So that has me concerned as well, that why such an increase, you know, if we have less, you have less inmates, but yet the number of occurrences of violence is almost the same as when there were 1,100 inmates.
Well, we have to remember
Yeah.
the more serious offenders are incarcerated right now due to bail reform and criminal justice reform. So that's definitely one of the reasons. And the county executive tasked me with getting 100 correction officers in 2022. I've been trying with civil service. They have been great. They've tried to expedite. We had been having biweekly calls with the union just so they could be in the loop and not in the dark about what are we actually doing to try to get classes. So I'm happy to reestablish those biweekly meetings with COBA. And again, the budgeted headcount is there. We can get there. It's going to take some time, but we're working on it to increase the staffing to where it should be.
Well, I think, you know, you should work with the union. But I think also, you know, I don't have, you know, whether or not, but, you know, I think Legislative Abrahams did bring up an important point to have the whole board of COBA here, you know, speaking on behalf of their members. And one of the highlights they brought out was that the commissioner, that there is not a level of confidence in this person. It obviously is impacting morale, and that's where I have a concern. You know, I have to say that. It's, you know, I worry about them. You know, they always feel like they've been the stepchildren in the county, and they shouldn't feel like that. But sometimes, I guess, actions that happen speak louder than words, and I really think that we have to consider this and really take a hard look at what's happening over in that jail and try to rectify it, because I think we need to. But thank you.
Okay, Minority Leader Abrahams, then Legislator Drucker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer.
then
And
move on.
I just want to say I appreciate this because I know this is not the formal hearing,
Right.
but obviously it's turned into a back and forth. When you get a chance, Ms. Fox, if you can look into other practices that are done throughout the country in terms of hiring correction officers, I would like to see it. I know you had said that civil service has worked with us, and we're just not able to get the numbers that we want. I don't know if it's an issue. I mean, look, the correctional officers have one of the toughest jobs between them and police officers in this country, and that could be an issue too in regards to the job itself just being a tough job, and many people just don't see it as an attractive job. But one of the things I did see, and I mean, I might be speaking a little out of turn here. I was driving back from Virginia this past weekend, and one of the things I did see, and it was in Delaware, they actually, and Sully might like to hear this, they actually provide bonuses to people who actually get through the process, take the job as an incentive to get the job. I don't know if that's something that's allowable in New York State or quite frankly in Nassau County, but to me, it seemed a little bit innovative that they were offering $5,000, $10,000 bonuses for people, signing bonuses to become a correction officer. Now, this was in their New York State correctional system, so this is a state thing. So obviously, there may be restrictions in regards to doing that here in the county. But to me, if it seems like we're having less officers, and officers are looking at the salary pay scales, and applicants are looking at the salary pay scales, and they're determining to themselves that it's not worth it, or we're not getting enough people, because we know there's going to be a drop-off, and we're not getting enough people, then there has to be something that we can do, and this is not anything new, that we can make the job more attractive. And I don't want to say that money is the beholden to everything. Obviously, you know, good quality of life, mental health are also good aspects of people taking on a position as well, but I just don't know if we're doing everything we can in our capacity. So if you can look into that practice, I don't know if it's allowable in New York State. I'd have to have our attorneys look into it a little bit more and research it. But it's something that I saw as I was driving back. I saw these big billboard signs throughout the state of Delaware that advertised signing bonuses to become a correction officer. Obviously, that would require them to actually get through the testing. You just can't sign for the test. Obviously, get through the testing, get through the background checks, get through the academy, everything else. But I'm just saying that could be something that we should be taking a look. I just feel like and I disagree with the presiding officer, I just feel like we're always at the point where individuals like yourselves say that we're doing all we can to hire. The union, everyone agrees that we need to hire, and then it just never materializes.
Yes, and it is frustrating. I do understand that.
Okay. Legislator Drucker. I'm sorry, President Officer.
Right, yeah. That'll be it.
Yeah, thank you, President Officer. I just wanted to summarize. I don't want to get into the go back and forth like we've been doing. You know, there's an inherent conflict between management and labor in any organization, any agency, any governmental association. And this administration is management, and Mr. Sullivan's membership is the workforce. And it is our job as the legislative body here to make sure that, and it's the management's responsibility too, to make sure that the needs and wants and requests of the workforce are met, or at least addressed and considered. So apparently what we're hearing today is that there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between membership and Mr. Sposato, and that needs to be fleshed out. And I welcome a meeting, Chairwoman Ford, and I hope that all of the legislators would be invited to that hearing to participate, because it's important. We need to understand, all of us, this is not a political thing, this is about safety. And we need to make sure that the needs and wants are reasonable, and they should be met, and they can be met, and management is listening, that we're not supposed to be afraid that the message isn't getting through. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming down, Tatum. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, legislative body.
Okay.